Iyasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayom Vishupad Paramhamsa Parvadikacharya To Tadasata Shishi Mad Whose Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Shrimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to Simple Devotees. All glories to Simple Devotees. All glories to Simple Devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. So we are on Canto 3, Chapter 10, text, what is it, 14? Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Bitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so here is our verse for the day. Sargo Nava Vidastasya Prakrito Vaikritastu Yaha Kala Dravya Gunairasya Trividha Pratisankramaha Sargo Nava Vidastasya Prakrito Vaikritastu Yaha Kala Dravya Gunair Asya Trividha Pratisankramaha Sargo Nava Vidhastasya Prakrito Vaikritastu Yaha Kala Dravya Gunairasya Trivridha Pratisankramaha Sargo Nava Vidhastasya Prakrito Vaikritastu Yaha Kala Dravya Gunairasya Trividha Pratisankramaha Sargam creation Navavidha of 9 different kinds Tasya it's Prakritaha material Vaikritaha by the modes of material nature Tu but Yaha that which Kala eternal time Dravya matter Gunahe qualities Asya it's Trividha 3 kinds Pratisankramaha annihilation. So the translation reads, there are 9 different kinds of creation besides the one which naturally occurs due to the interaction of the modes. There are 3 kinds of annihilation due to eternal time, the material elements and the quality of one's work. So I say, and you all please repeat, there are 9 different kinds of creation besides the one which naturally occurs due to the interactions of the modes. There are 3 kinds of annihilation due to eternal time, the material elements, and the quality of one's work. Okay, so here's Prabhupada's purport. The scheduled creations and annihilations take place in terms of the supreme will. And there are other creations due to the interactions of the material elements, which take place by the intelligence of Brahma. Later, these will be more explicitly explained. At present, only preliminary information is given. The 3 kinds of annihilation are 1, due to the scheduled time of annihilation of the entire universe, 2, due to a fire which emanates from the mouth of Ananta, and 3, due to one's qualitative actions and reactions. Sargo Nava Vidhastasya Prakrito Vaikritastu Yaha Kala Dravya Gunairasya Trividha Pratisankramaha. There are 9 different kinds of creation besides the one which naturally occurs due to the interaction of the modes. There are 3 kinds of annihilation due to eternal time, the material elements, and the quality of one's work. All right, so let me see if I can get this computer hooked up to that. I don't think that'll reach. I have another HDMI cable, so why don't we try that? We'll see if this works. You can try to hook it up and then I'll speak while we're attempting to connect things. Okay. We are beginning a section here where creation will be described in a detailed way. The material creation, of course, is a very intricate thing, and material creation helps us to get a focus on where we are and why we are in the situation that we're in. Because if one understands where we are, then one can understand also where we're going. Oh, good, it's visible there. All right, so this section is talking about the 9 creations and also the 3 types, or in another part in Bhagavatam, it mentions 4 types of annihilation. So we will briefly talk about that today, because this is the beginning verse. A little bit later on in this chapter, we will get a further elaboration on these. And of course, there's a very nice book put together by Sri Nandanandan or Stephen Knapp, where he talks about this whole thing and kind of puts it together in a very nice way. So let's start with these kinds of creation. So we start off by seeing that how we see creation is how we see our place in the universe. The mundane material scientists and modern intellectuals have a certain view of our world. So what's interesting is if we compare, we see that the Vedic view and the atheistic, modern, materialistic view have sharp differences in the basic fundamentals of the way that our universe is seen. The Vedic view paints a picture where creation is done with the idea of facilitating the living entities. It facilitates them in 2 ways. One of which it facilitates their ability to engage in sense gratification, or it facilitates their ability to learn what's really going on here and get out of the material world. Abir Bhutani Bhutatma Mahabhutayar Mahabhujaha Sasar Cha Chabachanyadya Swa Matratma Prasiddhaye. That the Supreme Lord sent forth species in various higher and lower qualities so that they could facilitate either their Atma or their Matra. Matra is sense gratification. Atma is their spiritual development. So that's why the material world is made. However, flip over to the material atheistic, scientific way of looking at it. We see a world that didn't have humans in mind, a world that wasn't created for any purpose, a world where mostly it's empty, rocks spinning around, and the only purpose to anything is the purpose that humans give it. That's kind of the modern view. So that's strikingly different. The materialistic view of the universe sees it as a bottom-up universe. We have some kind of building blocks that got there some way or another, you know, atoms and eventually various kinds of amino acids, and they build themselves up and create the world as we see it today. The Vedic picture paints a top-down universe where we start off with the most intelligent being, Brahma, and we have that generating, at least in the driver's seat, in creating the universe. So we also see that things happen in random according to the materialistic picture, you know, and depending on your scientific capability, you can enjoy. So if you know how to manipulate the material energy in a nice, practical, scientific way, you can enjoy. And if you don't, you're out of luck, I'm afraid, buddy. So we paint, the Vedas paint a picture where one performs activities. They may be sinful, they may be pious, they may even be devotional. If one performs pious activities, one will enjoy in the future. If one performs sin, one will naturally suffer. It won't happen right away, but that's built into the universe. And if one performs devotional service, one will gradually leave the material universe. So it's a very different picture, you know. And it's good to compare these two pictures because they are very different ways of looking at the world. And that's why people feel lost. In the Vedas, we have a personal universe. We have demigods. We have the Supreme Lord. We can always connect with the Supreme Lord. If we want, we can also connect with the demigods. And there are conscious entities organizing things. Whereas in the materialistic picture, there are no conscious entities anywhere. We even doubt that even humans are conscious, what to speak of anything else. And therefore, this picture is very bleak. There is no purpose why you're here. We do realize, at least a big factor, a big percentage of human population realize there must be some kind of morals, because if we don't have any kind of morals, we just live a dreadful life of people attacking one another and stealing whatever they can, you know. So, but where those morals come from, we don't know. They're socially kind of useful. And so we have a kind of a system of morality, a system of law, and that's about as far as it goes. So it's an impersonal system with no one in control, with no purpose that it's going towards. So that's very different than the universe depicted in the Vedas. So I wanted to briefly contrast those two because it makes an important effect that when we're preaching to people, we see that they are usually somehow or other caught up in this Western atheistic materialistic worldview. Now, these are the 9 creations. They will be enumerated in the next few verses, and we will see what they are. So first is Mahat Sarga, then there's Ahama Sarga, then there's Bhuta Sarga, Aindra Sarga, Vaikarika Sarga, and Tamasa Sarga. So this is what they are in a list. So Mahat Sarga is the creation of the Mahatat. The Pradhan is the non-differentiated version of the material energy. It's not about to do anything. It's not really going anywhere. It's an emanation or a byproduct of the Brahma Jyoti. So we find out in Brahma Samhita that the Brahma Jyoti is the source of this Pradhan, and the Pradhan becomes agitated due to the glance of the Supreme and becomes the Mahatat, which means it's sort of like made pregnant at that time. It's starting to do something. It's starting to diversify. And so the first thing that happens is the ahama sarga, which is false ego is generated. So false ego is a very important principle. And everyone's heard of false ego. And false ego is something that other people have. Those other people who annoy us, they have false ego. But we never have false ego. Only other annoying people have false ego. So false ego is everywhere in society. I once was suggesting the scientists could do a program to see if they could get a machine that would transmute false ego into useful electrical energy, and we could power the universe probably for the rest of eternity if we could figure out a simple machine that would harness the power of false ego and turn it into electricity. Oh, anyway, the idea is there that false ego is the first step. It connects us to what we're not, and it makes us feel a part of something that we're not a part of, the material universe and the material body. So we have the little machine and the big machine. The little machine is the body, the big machine is the whole universe. We feel we're adrift in the big machine, and we are driving around in our little sports car, little machine, which is a material body. And it's the false ego that says, yes, you are this body. And those senses, you better see what they need, because if you don't, you won't be happy. So that's ahama sarga. Then that sublimates and we get into bhuta sarga, or the tanmatra and the elements. So the tanmatra are the subtle sense objects. They're the categories of sensual experience. You know, if we had more time, I'd try to develop this a little bit more, because I think that this is a very mysterious category of the creation. And if modern science actually took it seriously, the tanmatras, there would be a lot to learn here. But modern science has not much of a concept of the tanmatras. There are philosophers who have investigated it a little bit, but mostly scientists don't so much. So the Ayendra Sarga is, now we have the five senses, the five knowledge acquiring senses, the five working senses together making 10. So the knowledge acquiring senses are our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, our tongue, and our skin. They bring information to the self. If actually anything is there, we've learned that the human experience is the experience of the senses. If we didn't have any senses, what would we be experiencing? Absolutely nothing, you know, because our entire ability to connect with the big machine outside through the little machine, the one that we're in, our entire ability is via the senses. So we have 5 that take in information, and we have 5 that output information or do work in the external world. So the working senses are, of course, the tongue, which speaks. We have the arms that move things, the legs, which motivate or move us around. We perambulate in various ways. And then we have the genitals and the rectum that do various things, which most of us are aware of, and no need to enumerate in great detail. But these are the working senses. And these working senses help us to put output into the material world. So now we have Bhuta Sarga, but it's important to realize at this point in the universal creation, there are no beings other than Brahma, you know. They're nothing yet. These are like the blueprints or the raw materials that will later be transformed by Brahma. So then we go to Vaikarika, which is the demigods in the mind. But these aren't all the demigods. This is just a specific group of demigods that have to do with the senses. So there are the 5 working senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, Then we have the tanmatra, the objects of the senses. And then we have the demigods that are in charge of those senses. So those form a unit, those work together with one another. So also the mind is generated at this point. And then Tamasa Sarga, ignorance. Where would we be without ignorance? We would be in a pickle. You know, we need our ignorance, just like we need our false ego, both those wonderful things. You cannot have a material world without both ignorance and false ego. So false ego, we identify with the wrong thing. And ignorance means that we have an erroneous view of who we are, where we are, and what's going on. So these are enumerated 5 types of ignorance. And we see that this whole group, these first 6, are called Prakrita Sarga. These are, the word was used in today's verse. This means that these 6 are done by the Supreme Lord as Garbha Vishnu. Garbha Vishnu creates these various categories. They're like, you know, when you're building a project, when you go to Lowe's, you buy the lumber, you buy the cinder blocks, you buy the mortar or whatever you're going to use, you know, you buy the 2x4s, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the stuff that's going to be used to build the universe. And it's provided by Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And then later, we have the secondary creation, which is created by Brahma, and it's called the Vikrita creation, which was also a word used today. And then we have the Tatastum Sarga, immovable living entities like the plants and mountains and things like that, various kinds of living entities that don't move. Then the Tiryak-shrotas, the lower animals. Here we have a picture of Kasyap Muni and his wives who create the various species. But this is later on. Evidently, Brahma creates a certain quantity of living entities directly from himself, from his various bodies. And we're going to hear that description as this, you know, unfolds here. But later on, as Brahma helps to generate Prajapatis, and those Prajapatis get to Prajapati Daksha, and Prajapati Daksha creates daughters. And then those daughters are given to various original sages, and one group of those daughters is given to Kasyap Muni, and that's where we have a detailed and much more expansive creation of the various animal forms, or Tiryak-shrotas. And finally, Arvak, that's us, the human beings. We are generated at the 9th creation. Actually, it should be 9. I don't know, somehow or another something got off in my numbering somewhere along the line. Let's see where I went afoul. Oh yeah, I have 6 twice. That's what the problem is. So that 6 should be 7, 7 should be 8, and 8 should be 9. So at any rate, Brahma also, as we just recently read, creates the planetary systems. So he helps to organize the arrangement of the planets, which were in his lotus stem. Then he does this thing. He generates from his own body immovable living beings, lower animals, and humans. But there are even further creations which are mentioned in some places. The Deva Sarga, which is the creation of the rest of the demigods. The Kumaras, which we know are generated from Brahma, the first beings that he personally generates. Then Rudra, or Lord Shiva, is generated. Then the mind-born sages, then the Vedas and Varnashram Dharma and Swayambhuva Manu. These are all other kinds of creation that happen. And so here is a kind of a complete list of the 9 basic forms of creation: the Mahatat, false ego, Tanmatras, 10 senses, demigods of the senses, types of ignorance, immovable beings, lower animals, and human. So these are progressively, as different phases, generated. And once these are all in place, then we have the universe pretty much the way we see it today. So we go from the Pradhan to the Mahat, where there's no beings and not much of anything going on, to the point where we have a fully developed universe. So here again, we start off with the Mahat, and then the false ego, sense objects, senses, sense demigods, not all demigods, but a certain sense. There's 10 demigods that are in charge of the various senses. Then we have ignorance, 5 types of ignorance. And then this is Brahma's timeline. Movable, lower animals, human beings, demigods, and then we can go on beyond that to other things which are part of Brahma's creation. In some cases, these things happen at various times depending on the creation. So here is our team, universal creation team. You have the Supreme Lord, he creates the original substance. Brahma creates planets, forms, and some beings. Shiva creates some beings of a lower consciousness at a certain point, and Brahma tells him to stop. And then we have Kasyapa and his wives create various beings. We have also other Prajapatis that are creating various beings at different times, but usually not a whole lot of beings. So they're not really major players in the creational blueprint. So these are major players here. So let's, with that? Yeah. But for the purpose of universal creation, we usually think of Mahavishnu and Garbha Vishnu, because those are the ones that are doing the details of universal creation. Okay, so let's briefly talk about the 4 types of destruction. In this particular verse that we read today, it mentions 4 kinds of destruction, which are only 3 of the ones that we see here. In the 12th canto, it mentions all 4 of these. And the one that's missing from today's verse is number 4, Atyantika. So Naimittika, occasional annihilation, is what happens at the end of Brahma's day. So Brahma lives for 100 years, or 2 prarardhas. So Brahma has 2 50-year segments of his life. And we're right about in the middle there, as far as where we are right now in the universe, in case you want to set your clock. Then this 100 years, each of them have 12 months. Each month has 30 days. And in each day of Brahma, the entire universe, or not the entire universe, but the material universe that we're in, from mostly the earthly plane down further, are all merged into the waters of devastation. Then when Brahma's alarm clock goes off and he wakes up, he creates the earth plane and below again. They become unmerged. And so this happens every day of Brahma. And this is called occasional annihilation, because it happens from a fire, from Anantasesha, et cetera, et cetera. This first burns the earth plane and below, and then waters come in and dissolve it. And during this time, there's no earthly creatures, but living beings in higher planetary systems, in Mahar, Tapa, Jana, et cetera. Those lokas, they continue to exist. Now, prakritiha annihilation is elemental. This means that all the universes are annihilated. This is when Mahavishnu inhales, and not just our universe, but all of them are destroyed all at the same time. That's total annihilation of the material cosmos in every aspect. And then it becomes non-manifested for the time of Mahavishnu's inhale. And then when he exhales again, everything comes back out. So Continuous, which is number 3 types of destruction, continuous destruction, is the fact that the material nature is constantly destroying everything, which you may have noticed when you go into the bathroom and various things stop working, and you find your own body after some time. Interesting parts of it that you never noticed before cease to function, and you find other things that seem to break down. So this is a part of the overall plan. The material universe is designed to do this. The universe is like a giant recycling plant. Forms, as we know, they are created. They remain for, they grow, they remain for some time. Sometimes they produce byproducts, then they dwindle, and then they're disintegrated again. So this is the nature of everything in the material universe, that forms, they're integrated and work as a complete unit for a certain period of time, and then they become destroyed by time. Just as they were created by time, they become destroyed by time. And this kind of destruction is called continuous or nitya. And finally, we have atyantika, which is the most important kind. That wasn't mentioned in today's verse. Atyantika is a destruction of the living entity's separate desire to enjoy in the material world. When that's destroyed, we go back home, back to Godhead. So that's a special kind of destruction. That is the kind that we're after, actually, that we are right now hypnotized, dazzled, bamboozled, joyfully running after the material world and its energies. But eventually we will give up that unfortunate project, and we will go back home, back to Godhead. So that's the 4th kind of annihilation. So this is a kind of an overview of both the 9 kinds of creation and the 4 kinds of destruction. And I wanted to kind of do a brief comparison there between our Vedic conception of things and the modern atheistic materialistic view. Are there any questions or comments? We know that there, it says in Bhagavad Gita that 1,000 ages are considered Brahma's day. So that means his full 24-hour day. So if I remember correctly, Kali Yuga is 432,000 years long. And the cycle of all 4 ages since Dwapara Yuga is twice as long, Treta Yuga is 3 times as long, and Satya Yuga is 4 times as long. So 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 make 10. So that makes the whole Div Yuga 10 times duration of Kali Yuga. So 10 times the duration of Kali Yuga bumps it up to 4,320,000 years. Now that has to get doubled because it's the same for the night, even though there's nothing going on in the night. So that makes 8,640,000 years long. Now we have to shift that over by 1,000 because 1,000 of those make up a day of Brahma. So that makes it 8,640,000,000 years long, if I remember right. So if I've done my math in my head right, then that should be the way it is. And so Brahma has 30 of these in each of his months. He has 12 months in a year, and he has 100 years of that. So Brahma lives for 311 trillion years or something like that. I've forgotten what that figure comes out to, but something like that. So these are enormous lengths of time, and the famous materialistic science promotion talking head Carl Sagan once said that the Vedas are the only scripture on earth that have a timeline that's anything close to science. He said, doubtless by sheer chance. But you can see in some way, Carl Sagan actually had seen that there was something a little bit deeper in the Vedic thing, but he I guess he couldn't get into it because he was, Mr. Science, but yeah.
I was just curious, could you clarify? Adiva Yoga means all four yogas combined, right? And then also Pralaya, is that another term for Ajantika?
Yeah, well, Pralaya means destruction in general, right? So there, Pralaya means destruction, and Divya is just the sum total. It has another name, but I forget what it is. Divya Yugas generally mean, it's like we have 4 seasons in the course of a year. We have spring, we have summer, we have fall, and we have winter. So in a similar, larger scale, sort of fractal expansion, we have 4 ages that form a Divya Yuga, and that's Satya, and usually it's Dwapara and then Trecha and then Kali. But in the particular one that we're living now, Dwapara and Trecha are swapped. So, Dwapara means 2, so it should be the second one, and usually it is. And Trecha means 3, so it should be the third one, and usually it is. But we notice in our particular Divya Yuga, they're switched, that we have actually Satya, Trecha, Dwapara, and Kali. Yeah. Why are they switched? Good question. I'm not sure I can give an answer to that. It may have something to do that Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya come in this particular Divya Yuga. They don't come in every Divya Yuga. They just come in this one. Kavya Chandra has a question or a comment.
Yeah. Is there any information how Kashyapa and his wives, who were all, beautiful human forms, as far as we know, create all these other species?
Yeah. I don't think it's described in detail.
Are they like mental?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see even when Brahma's creating, he's not creating in the usual way. How do people create? How do species get created today? We all know sex life, that's how it happens. 2 of the same species come together, a male and a female, and, from their bodies generate new bodies. In general, that's the way it works. Plants do some various odd things, but basically that's the way it works. But when we back up, one of the points that I wanted to make that I think a lot of people don't grasp is that this material universe is a lot more plastic than people think it is. One of the modern atheistic, materialistic, scientific worldviews is that we have laws of nature, and these laws can never be violated. Speed of light travels at a certain speed, never changes. That we have F equals ma, we have E equals mc squared, we have the various other formulae that scientists devise, and those are written into the fabric of the universe, but they are not. They are actually just shackles, or they are the forced restrictions by material nature on human beings. When we get into demigods and people with higher, backstage passes, these people, they have the ability to set aside these things. When Brahma creates, he doesn't create in the same way we do, as our Bhakti Prabhav Swami was saying the other day, that Brahma, he creates, and he's not even certain exactly how he does it, just like we do. When, if you're playing basketball or you are playing music, you know what you're doing, but you don't know exactly how you do it, you know. And if you start thinking about how you do it, you lose the ability to do it, you know. So it's kind of like that. We even have, you know, when the sun god appeared to Kunti Devi, you know, that he told her that she would remain a virgin, and Karna was born from her ear. Now, don't try this at home. This won't work in our modern, you know, world where we believe all these rules of biology and physics are written in stone. They're not written in stone. And demigods have the bypasses for these. It's actually more like the material world is a virtual reality. These virtual reality and computer games and interactional games that they have on the internet are a good analogy to the way that our world actually works. That, you know, a character in either a, first person shooter game or a interaction game like Second Life or something like that, there's gravity, but it's not really gravity. It's some software developer wrote a program that makes objects stick together in a particular way. It's an artificial and it's a restrictive element that's a part of the program that the young person is playing or is involved in. So in a similar way, the fact that we age, the fact that our bodies decay, the fact that we have to engage in karma, the fact that when we want to create new humans, there's only one way to do it. All these things are restrictions. So we don't believe in the laws the same way the material sciences do. We believe in the lawmaker. So they believe in the laws, we believe in the lawmaker. The lawmaker can change. So that's how I respond to that they do so in some kind of what we would call mystical or magical way. And they don't need to necessarily follow the same laws. And it's also oftentimes mentioned that they give birth immediately. It doesn't take 9 months of gestation, et cetera, et cetera.
And that answers which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right. So here we do have the answer.
Did they create eggs or did they create chickens?
Well,
it says they created a species.
Right.
They must.
We don't have the
I remember reading
details.
it sometime. I was just reading Bhagavatam. And I got some realization about it, but I don't remember exactly what it said. To look it up again. When it starts saying how these daughters of Brahma or Prajapati or whatever started creating. We know Brahma had the 9 or the 7 mental sons,
Right.
He just thought, okay, we need a yogya, we need someone for this, we need someone for, and they just were there. And we need someone to preach all over the universe. Narada Muni appeared.
Right. So these are all mental born because Brahma has a body that can create things by his thinking. He doesn't have to go to Lowe's and buy the requisite raw materials. He can just create things by thinking, which most of us sadly cannot do. But, this is there. And of course, we learn also later in Srimad Bhagavatam that there are yogis who can do this too. These are, there are bypasses for what we call reality. There are places that we can't go, but others can go. And there are yogis who can create things just with their minds. Karda Muni created this flying, palatial spaceship for his wife. And he created it with his mind. He didn't have to actually build it or to go into some kind of, partnership with a whole contingent of engineers and do a Kickstarter and, build it up. He could just do it by his mental power. And similarly, even yogis can do this to some extent. There's Isita, Vasita, Mahima, Laghima, Prakamya, and all these various mystic powers that even low-grade yogis can do some of these things, creating a planet. Generally speaking, it would be pretty tough for us to create a planet, but there are yogis who can do that. Why you would want to, I don't know, but it's evidently one of the mystic powers listed in Krishna's discussion with Uddhava, that he explains these, various mystic powers. So if one regulates the life airs and one regulates the breathing, one can do what would be termed by others magic. In other words, that's the bypass for our virtual reality. Most people are not, sysops or systems administrators of these various kinds of games that they have on the computer. But if you are, you can change gravity. If you are, you can change what you look like, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all, shape shifting is quite a common thing in the Vedic literatures, that some entity, a demigod or other, can take some other form. It's quite common, but can you do it? No. Can I do it? No. But even yogis can do it, so that's another one of those mystic powers, that would be considered magic by modern thinkers, but magic is alive and well. It never went anywhere. It just, people stopped believing in it at a certain point because they thought it was all hokum, but although very few people can really do it, I mean, certainly people know how to fake it, but it can be done. Yeah.
Yeah, they can travel through the river.
Right.
It's not like they float or swim. They just get in and then they get out 1,000 miles away. Like you send an email or something. Right. It's not. You want to log on to something, they say, we'll send you a code, and immediately they send you, the code is there,
What is it?
Like if you want to get into PayPal or something.
Right.
And they send you a code to make sure it's you, and it's immediately there.
Right.
So the same way they get in the river and they get out. So that doesn't make,
in Second Life.
Now you can do it. You can create your own avatar and join some game or something.
Right. That's why I use that analogy, because in Second Life, you can, you can get somewhere by taking a vehicle, you can walk there, or you can teleport there. Of course, we can't do that in real life, but in a computer, you can certainly do that. Your avatar is just instantly transported from one place to another. No big deal. And in a virtual reality to do that. And so our actual reality is exactly like that, but we just don't have the passes to be able to do that. If we want to go somewhere, we do have to buy a ticket or walk or one of those things. You had a question?
So I guess coming back to this verse, is like these 9 sargas and 4 types of destruction, is this jnana, or is there something actionable that if we want to become better bhaktas, we want to deepen our connection with Krishna consciousness from this particular, is there something we can do?
Well, what this does, it helps we meditate on this. It helps us to realize who Krishna really is. He's the one that started this whole system, and he's the one that's absolutely in charge of it, all the details of it. And it's not a simple system. It's a very complex system. The scientists think it's complex, and we do too. We're both in agreement on that, and when we look at it this way, we begin to see that the Vedas do have an explanation of why things are squirrely in the particular ways that they are. We notice a lot of strange things about the world that we live in. And this begins to tell us why they are the way that they are. And we see that the material energy is designed to look solid. It's designed to seem ultimate. It's designed to seem like the object of our desire. But all these are just appearances. They're not real. I think that it's really helpful to think of our material world as a virtual reality, the way people see it in computers, because people have a lot of, personal experience with virtual realities on a computer platform. And supposedly there's more in store if Mark Zuckerberg has his way. So the idea here is that if we see that this world too is like that, it's not solid the way materialists would have us believe, but it's functioning according to laws. Those laws can be set aside if you have the right clearance to do it. Not everybody can do it, but some can. And there are people who are behind the scenes making it happen. And what's most important is that the material energy is here. It's not a virtual reality in the sense that you can do anything at the end of the day, you get some points added up and you go home. It's not like that. It actually, what you're doing in this material world does make a difference. And it makes a difference on what you will experience future and whether you get out of the material world into the real world. If this is a virtual reality, then the real question is, if this is virtual, where's the real reality? And the question is, the answer, of course, is it's in the spiritual world. That's where it is. If you want to go there, that's where there are really people, and that's where people really have enjoying abilities. That's where people are serving the Supreme Lord. That's where things go on forever. That's where things are what they appear to be, instead of here where things are sometimes not what they appear to be. So anyway, it helps to give us a sense of how this machine works. And we're not just guessing at it, or, as many religionists do, coming up with some kind of really sketchy and flaky version of why things are the way they are. Okay.
I was just going to say, is that Goloka? Is that where we would end up?
Yeah.
Goloka. Yeah.
Right. Goloka Vrindavan is the spiritual world. Even the spiritual world has various layers and levels, as the Brihat Bhagavatamrita amply describes. But those in the attitude of the love of the gopis will wind up in Goloka Vrindavan, because that's where the higher rasas are actually played out. Otherwise there's Vaikuntha lokas where there's servitude and other rasas are played out. But in all those, once we get out of the material kingdom into the spiritual world proper, at that point everything is permanent. There people aren't born, they don't die, people don't get old, people are not hampered by poor eyesight or by having to make money to be able to make their way in the world. None of those things exist in the spiritual world. But there are activities, relationships, there are various pastimes. Those things do exist, but they're all centered on the Supreme Lord. That's the difference. So unless and until we are ready to take our place and serve the Lord fully with our whole heart at all times, we are destined to remain here in this world where it's possible to ignore the Lord to some extent. And as soon as we give up that tendency completely, we can go back, but not before. All right. So I thank you all for your kind attention. And I'm sorry I was working on this PowerPoint to try to, because I thought today's verse really would be hard to grasp unless we had some visuals. So that's why I put it together, but it took me a little longer. And I started out with a migraine this morning, so I didn't get off the ground until a little bit later on. But I was hoping that it would not turn into a full-blown one, and it didn't. So Krishna blessed me in that way. I'm here. So all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.